Do architects need clean, crisp, perfectly precise hand lettering in this day and age? No, not at all. We've got computers for that. But refining your architectural handwriting can be the defining factor that elevates your concept drawings, distinguishing them between student work and the refined output of a design practitioner. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it should be professional. Welcome to another episode of Dig Sketch. I'm Harvey Miller, and this week we're going to go over architectural handwriting as it applies to digital sketching on the iPad. It's important because as a designer, as you grow in your career, your sketching and your writing becomes almost like your signature. It's an expression of your design voice. And so today, I want to focus on the writing we put in our concept sketches. But it will also benefit your writing in general, from markups and revisions to your team, to quick sketch notes in your day-to-day communication with clients and consultants, to live online or in-person meetings or presentations. I'll give you a quick story from many years ago. I'd been working on a concept sketch plan and was just wrapping it up, and my mentor was peeking over my shoulder and said, it doesn't quite look professional. And I had been slaving over this drawing for hours, and I was like, agree to disagree? But he was right. He started to point to all my text. It was all over the place. Different angles, some were caps, some weren't. My arrows were inconsistent, but I had thought all of this was conveying a design energy. And then he said, look, your actual sketch is fine, but two things. Everything that comes out of this office is a reflection of you and our firm. And two, if this gets passed on to the client and they pass it on to someone else, and you're not there to explain your sketch, half of your design intent is going to get lost. And then he said, design is communication. Now, what does that mean? Everything we do as designers is developing a certain set of design information and communicating that to someone else. Whether it's to your team, will they be inspired by your design? Or to your consultants, will they understand the true intent of your design? Or to your client, will you make it easy for them to approve your design? And all this will ultimately determine whether the end user will appreciate your design. And it's not just what we say, but how we say it carries additional meaning. Each drawing, each sketch is a message, and how you craft this message is your design voice. So you get to choose, what kind of designer do you want to be? What values are important to you? What level of professionalism do you want to convey to your clients? We can dig into all this in a future video, but for now, let's get back to handwriting, which is a reflection of the professionalism and the authority in your design voice. So today, I'm going to share some of the tips my mentor passed down to me, which were passed down to him, with respect to traditional handwriting. And we'll start with how to set things up. I'll give you two tips, one physical and one digital, to help you improve your writing. And then we'll go over the basics and some of the techniques I've used to adapt to writing on an iPad. And then we'll finish it off with some things you can do to personalize it and make it your own, to start to craft your own design voice. So let's get into it. So in setting up, this brings us to our first tip, get stabilized. And I'm talking about your body and how you sit and where your weight is distributed. You want to sit up enough so your weight is more on your forearm or your elbow and not so much on your hand. This will free up your hand and your wrist for more flexibility and control. If your elbow is floating off the table and you're putting some weight on your hand, you'll see you have less control. If you're trying to draw long arcs or straight lines, it's okay to let your elbow float, because in those instances you want to lock your wrist and pull your whole arm. But when you're trying to write, you want to lock your elbow or your forearm on the table and limit your movement to your wrist. And when you're sketching digitally, you want to align the drawing to your hand, as opposed to moving your hand around to align to the drawing. You want to keep this hand and arm static and comfortable to maximize consistency. Next up is the digital setup. I'll use the native grids in Procreate or Morpholio Trace when I'm doing single lines of text like these simple callouts. But when I need multiple lines, I'll actually draw in my own additional guides to tighten up the vertical spacing. First, I'll roughly frame out the area of the drawing I want to focus on. To get the size of my text and my grid right, I'll zoom out and just roughly scribble the height of the text as I see fit for the drawing. Loosely thinking about how much text will be on the page, where it's going to go, and maybe test out a few letters quickly, zooming in and out, trying to imagine what will look right on the overall page. Once I have an idea, I'll zoom back in and resize the grid to that loose scribble or one of my test letters. Again, this is just in the context of putting a concept sketch together. I just want the text to be legible when the drawing is viewed from a desktop at full screen. And now we're ready to start lettering. So let's start with proportions. When you're just starting out, you want to create 2 more guidelines, roughly here and here, at roughly the 1/3 and 2/3 marks. Now the letters that have a horizontal line in them will utilize these, such as the A, B, E, F, P, and R. I'm aligning them to those intermediate guides. Here are what mine look like. Note, all the letters generally try to fit within a box of the same height and width in proportion. As you get used to this over time, you won't need these intermediate guidelines anymore. Now you may wonder why architects use all caps. Well, it's for consistency. Back in the day, there would be multiple people working on hand lettering, and this helped keep them all in line. It's not really necessary anymore in this day and age. Notice the caps all stay within the guides, whereas some lowercase letters would dip below it. So I personally prefer all caps for when I have multiple lines of text. It keeps things nice and tidy. But this is all a preference. You can choose how you want to letter things, but the key is to just try to achieve consistency. And it doesn't have to be a flawless, machine-like consistency, just enough so it looks tidy. One other way I achieve consistency is to group letters that have similar characteristics and practice them together. Note the vertical lines in these letters, the B, H, I, the P, the R, the T. When you're just starting out, focus on making these lines vertical. Use the grid as your guide. And for this group, note the angles. Notice the B and the D and the E have this slight uptick to them, as well as the F, the J, the L, the P, the R, and the S. And with this group, we have angled ellipses, and you want to have these look like a family as well. The C, the G, the O, the Q. So take some time over the next few days and doodle these letters in these groups to try to achieve consistency between them. Do it repeatedly to get that muscle memory going. And though there's no real need for perfect hand lettering in our industry today, learning the basics will provide a strong foundation from which you can build upon as you improve your handwriting. So I've provided a few more helpful links from other channels in the description below, and I'd suggest you try some of them out. I've also provided a link to download the practice page I'm using in this video here. You'll be able to see how my text looks using the pencil, pen, and marker from my own Dig Sketch brush set. So take the time to go through the exercise of practicing all your letters. Be deliberate about it. Practice this on regular paper as well, with pens and markers. Choose how you want each of your letters to look. Do this for the next few days and it will change how your concept drawings look for the rest of your life. And now we're going to talk about sketching on the screen. And this brings us to tip 2, find your zoom level. So one of the biggest challenges writing on the iPad is that you're constantly zooming in and out. It's not like a piece of paper that just stays static at one particular zoom level. Sometimes you're zoomed in really close, sometimes you're zoomed out. And if you're writing at these different zoom levels, your text is going to be all over the place. But there's one thing you can do to try to get things a little more consistent. So I call this a vertical stroke test. Once you set your grid and/or guidelines, zoom in and start drawing some vertical strokes at the height of your letters, fitting them in between your guidelines. Do this slow at first, get them straight, and then start to speed up and try to get into a rhythm, shutting your mind off so you can intuitively get the feeling for this. This is to develop that muscle memory for your vertical stroke letters. What we're trying to figure out is how much you should zoom in, and we want to establish a common zoom level that you just get used to and can quickly come back to whenever you write text. Keep in mind this is not exact. Now adjust the zoom level so it's not too tall or too short for these vertical strokes, but at a level where you can comfortably and fairly quickly hatch these strokes. That's the size of the text and zoom level you need to be at. You want to get the feeling down for this, so that whenever you need to go back to your zoom level, you can hatch a few of these strokes and adjust your zoom accordingly. The idea is to practice this enough so that it gets ingrained into your muscle memory. And over time, you'll be able to quickly go back to your zoom level. This is not an exact science. It's something that you just need to get used to over time. Next up, you need to adjust your line weights. Test out the A, B, C, D, and E. Note the spaces within the letters. Are they still legible? or is your line weight too thick? Then zoom out and see if your text is still legible at 100% zoom, or is it too thin? Once you've arrived at the right thickness, this should roughly be your middle line weight in your drawing. Now all this sounds like a lot, but it's actually done within a matter of seconds once you've practiced it a few times. I still do the vertical stroke test and practice letters before starting any handwriting on any of my sketches. It would be great if Procreate could allow you to set a zoom level and be able to jump back to it when needed. You are able to quickly zoom out to 100% with a quick pinch. I use this feature all the time. In Morpholio Trace, you can actually see the zoom level here and just take note of it whenever you're writing. Or sometimes I'll set down a new layer of trace at the zoom level I want, and I'm able to write out my text, then zoom out, see how it looks overall, then zoom back in just by tapping on the layer again. It's kind of like setting up different views for your sketch. And this brings us to our last section, your personal style. Now once you have the basic rules down, it's time to start bending them. This will distinguish your personal style. So you want to start slow, but then experiment with speed, because this is supposed to be a daily tool. See what feels comfortable for you as you write faster and faster. And just slow down as required when things get a little out of control. Keep in mind, you want to maintain a consistency. You can bend some rules here, but if you do, just try to keep consistent. And it's not just about your refined presentation drawings, but everyday communication to those around you. You want to keep things legible. Again, it's not just about style. There is a function and a purpose to why you're even writing your text on these sketches. So some examples of where you can start to bend the rules are certain letters like the P or the R. You can extend them further, play with the angles, play with the shape of your ellipses, but whatever you do with one of these letters, try to apply the same principles to the rest of that same family or group. It would be good to just practice these letters in their groups and have some fun with it, experiment with it, bend the rules even further, see what works for you. Just keep it legible and consistent. And if you're wondering how legible does it really need to be as you experiment, well, it comes down to one question. Do you want people to be able to read it? Again, design is communication. I'll leave it at that. I was able to shift my handwriting early in my career because my mentor gave me a nudge in the right direction. So I'm hoping with this video, I'm able to give you a nudge to consider improving your architectural handwriting. So let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you've watched this far, please give it a like. And if you're not ready to subscribe, I won't force you into it. Just think about it. But do know I am working on more quality content to not only improve your digital sketching skills, but to help you become a better, more confident designer. So until then, I'll see you in the next video.